So over on the NA version of the game, Enkidu's out on raid up, and I didn't really think this was a big deal to a lot of people, but I've gotten a lot of comments of people being like, hey man, when are you going to cover Enkidu? I need to know as to whether or not I'm summoning on this banner or not. So apparently Enkidu is a lot more popular than I realized, and I mean, going through some of the fan art for this video, you know, to get the thumbnail and everything, yeah, I kind of realized why. I mean, I'll pose this question to you guys in the comments down below. Is it gay if it's clay? Question mark. I'll let all the philosophers down in the comments down below debate that, but meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Enkidu as a servant in the game FGO and talk about if he's worth summoning for or not. And if you enjoy FGO content, I upload these videos every single day. We finally hit 10K, now the goal is 100K, so smash that like button, click the subscribe button, we're going all the way to the moon, and your support will help us reach that destination. If you also want to go that extra mile in showing your support, you can click that join button to become a channel member. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into this video, starting off with Enkidu's hits. Which, Enkidu is built very weirdly because he's got this quick deck with a Buster NP, and then when we get to his first skill, he's got like 2 different mana bursts. And because of this weird style of gameplay, all of his cards are actually rather good. He's packing a triple quick deck with 4 hits each with a 12% star gen stat and an NP generation stat of 0.53%, so not a bad NP generation or star genning stat. And as many of you guys may or may not know, using Enkidu, you actually can gen a fair bit of stars to allow him to just kind of become a little crit machine, because he is basically a solo servant. And so when you have him as a solo servant, you kind of just click all the green cards, get a whole bunch of stars, then crit everybody, and then just repeat the process. This is good because he has 1 arts card with 5 hits on it, so if you crit on said arts card, you're going to be refunding a lot of NP. Because even though his NP generation stat is kind of average at 0.53%, it does just have very, very high hits on it. Meaning you'll actually gen a lot of NP if you can take advantage of him being able to drop stars and then get a crit on said arts card. And then he has the godly 6-hit extra attack. It's so mythical, we've barely even seen this kind of extra attack before. As you all know, the extra attack is a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big damage. And when you have a high hit extra attack, it really does just round out your brave chains and help the servant just look that much better. But this boy's got a 6-hit extra attack. If 4 is the average, 5 is exceptional, then 6 is just legendary, right? This just means his brave chains are going to be hitting completely different. And the good thing is, again, he's a solo servant, so you should be brave chaining all the time with Enkidu. So overall, his hits are pretty good. We do need to kind of move into the skills so I can explain the oddities of Enkidu and kind of how he works. So let's just move on to skill 1. So what this skill does is it gives him a guaranteed 50% mana burst for 1 turn. That's already really good because he's got a Buster NP. This is massively gassing up the damage of said NP. But then here's the interesting part. It's a coin flip as to what other mana burst he's going to get for that turn, meaning he also has a 50% quick mana burst and a 50% arts mana burst. And it's a coin flip as to which one he gets. It's guaranteed that he'll get one of them. That's really good, but you don't know which one you're actually going to get. And so this is what kind of makes Enkidu's style of gameplay fun. And overall, it really doesn't matter because let's say you get the arts mana burst. Well, this means your arts card on that turn is going to be insanely good for buffing up NP gen, because it's getting a 50% buff, and that not only buffs its damage, but that buffs up its NP gain value as well. God forbid you get the arts mana burst while you have a crit on that arts card, and you'll be refunding a massive amount of your NP back. But the same can be said if you get the quick effect, because the quick cards are also getting their NP gain buff by the quick mana burst, and arguably that's better because you have more quick cards at your disposal, as that's also going to buff up their star generation stat as well. So overall, it's a very interesting way to build him, because you look at his hits and you're like, okay, so they built him in kind of this way where he's got a lot of just different good cards. Where are they going with this? So you're like, okay, so they give him the guaranteed Buster buff to make sure his NP never really flops. But then they give him this ability to kind of swap between his quick and his arts cards. Obviously, this is for like the lore reasons where Enkidu's able to change his shape and be this really diverse weapon that Gilgamesh uses, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Nobody cares about the lore. We're here for gameplay, okay? But it does make Enkidu kind of interesting when it comes to his offenses and how he buffs his cards. Thankfully, though, everything else about Enkidu is pretty straightforward. When we go to his second skill, He's massively reducing one enemy's critical attack chance by 50% for 3 turns. Again, keep in mind, this is a solo survival servant. Usually, I wouldn't really care about lowering their critical attack chance, but one, he's doing it by 50%, which is a massive amount for 3 turns. Meaning, Enkidu should rarely be getting crit by the enemy, which makes him survive even harder. Then he has the ability to remove an enemy's evasion buff, and then give himself an evasion buff for 1 turn. Just for newer players that might think this has to be like an A-B sequence, no, they don't have to have a dodge, he doesn't steal it. He removes their buff, and even if they don't have a buff, he guaranteed gives himself the dodge. I just wanted to make that clear, because I have seen some people be like, oh man, this guy didn't have a dodge, I can't steal it. It's like, no, you're not stealing the buff. Enkidu's giving himself a buff while he's taking away one of theirs. But this does make it pretty decent. The only issue is that some bosses you'll encounter will have a permanent unremovable dodge buff, and you can't remove that, and that's where you'd rather have something like Sure Hit or Pierce Invincibility. But for most general uses, for most bosses, you should be fine. This should actually be a very good addition, because 1, you're reducing your chance of getting crit, 2, you have the ability to neg an NP, and A, if they're like this dodge spammy character, you can just remove their dodges. Very nice. Then we have his 3rd skill. This is really self-explanatory. It's a 10k heal that removes all of his debuffs. And keep in mind, Enkidu has some of like the thickest HP in the game. Even without grails or anything, he's sitting at 15,300. If you want to grail him, he's at 16,762. And if you bring him all the way to 120, he's going to be in that 20k range, give or take if you're using foes on your Enkidu, which at that point you probably are using foes on him if you're bringing him to 120. In which case, having a 10k heal is actually really good because that's half of his HP. With a thick HP bar like that, I mean, it just makes him really good. So overall, you can see that this guy is a very tanky servant that has a lot of skills that keep him in the game and has decent skills for helping him do damage, but that's not all that he has, because he actually does, this is something I want to mention, he actually has a useful app-end skill. So a lot of the servant's app-end skills are a little wonky. So the extra attack one and the starting 20% gauge, those are always going to be good on pretty much every servant. Like, if you can afford to do that, go ahead, pop off, do that. Who doesn't want a 50% buff to their extra attack, and who doesn't want to start off with a free 20% NP? The one that's a little whack is the one that gives them special damage mod against certain enemies. And a lot of them are super weird. It's be like, okay, so I have a saber and now they have a rider damage mod. I mean, thanks, I guess, if I'm ever using my saber against a rider, which is really uncommon, but if I do find myself in that scenario, cool, thanks, kind of good, I suppose. But the ones that I think are really good is the entire category of servants that gets damage against berserkers, because you actually will bring them against berserkers for super effective damage, and now you're just doing even more damage to them. And Enkidu is one of those servants, so if you want to level up one of his app-end skills, you can level up his special damage mod to give him 30% extra attack specifically against berserkers, which you're going to bring him against anyway because he's just going to nuke him into the ground. Speaking of nuking him into the ground, he has one of the hardest hitting NPs in the entire game. And the crazy thing is that it's not even a bad NP. It's not like it's just a big beat stick NP. The NP itself is actually really good. If you're a threat against humanity, you just get a free 200% damage mod against them. Keep in mind, damage mods usually scale 150% to like 250%. They just gave him a free 200% damage mod. They said, screw that overcharge stuff. We're just going to give you the damage for free. And then also keep in mind that threats against humanity are like a lot of the hardest bosses in the game, like big trees, beasts, all of those like big boy, intense, hard boss fights. Those are all the threats against humanity. So he has a damage mod against all of like the hardest bosses in the game. That's his niche. But then for some reason they thought that wasn't enough, and then they were like, you know what, we're gonna give you a 500% chance to stun a divine enemy if you're fighting them. And would you look at that, the divine category is a big old thick category of enemies. So if he can't blow you up, he's stunning you in your place, sometimes both at the same time. And then on overcharge, he's reducing the enemy's defense, by the way, this activates first, by 30 to 50% depending on overcharge level. Meaning, he's just curse smacking people with his NP, like, they don't stand a chance. He's just gonna obliterate who's ever in his way. And now I know Enkidu sounds really good, and I know a lot of people are probably thinking I'm gonna be like, you gotta summon for this servant, he's crazy good. And yes, Enkidu is very, very, very good. You can look on YouTube, there are plenty of just Enkidu solo videos because he is a very good soloer. But with that being said, again, you know, I gotta put on my dad glasses and everything, you know, over here, put on the dad sweater, and let the sun people real quick, alright? because you gotta remember what other banners are coming out this year. If you're a free-to-play player, obviously if you're a whale or you're like a dolphin, this does not apply to you. Like if you're going to be spending money on the game anyway, then you just summon for whatever you want, okay? Just make sure you have enough to pay rent, you have enough to get some food, you know, make sure you're not dying out here for FGO. But for everybody else, you free-to-play players, if you summon for Enkidu, you have to understand what you're not going to be able to summon on, right? You got to take advantage of your opportunity cost, meaning if you summon for Enkidu, you have less courts for other banners. Very simple concept, right? And so if you summon for Enkidu, even if you get him first, second, third multi, right? Something really early on, that is now 1, 2, or 3 multis you cannot do towards Space Ishtar, Scotty, Super Orion, or the New Year's banner. Now, if you've already got Scotty, you're waiting for Space Ishtar to come back around next year, for whatever reason you don't care about Super Orion, and you already have everybody on the New Year's gacha, then I guess pop off, right? Go ahead and summon for this unit. Or if Enkidu's like one of your favorite characters in the game, understandable, go for this servant. Maybe you really like Enkidu, but you just want to throw one multi at the banner. Just consider if that one multi on Enkidu you think is worth it to you when you think about that's going to be one multi you can't put towards another banner. So just keep that in mind. I definitely think he's good enough to summon on. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying we have a pretty good end of the year here over on the NA version of the game. And I just don't want anybody to be regretting their decision. So let me know in the comments down below if you guys are going to be summoning on Enkidu or if you're going to keep holding out for other banners. Me personally, I'm holding out for Scotty. Didn't get my Scotty on the 3rd year anniversary and I'm getting her this year. Gosh dang it. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace late, guys.